She married him for love, but he married her for revenge. If you're new to my channel, make sure to support by subscribing and turning on the notifications. Your support means everything. All right, let's dive into the story. The wedding was perfect, almost too perfect. The chandeliers sparkled, the guests cheered, and the vows were spoken with trembling lips. She held his hands, gazing into his eyes, believing every promise, every whispered word of love. But as he slipped the ring onto her finger, something flickered in his expression, a shadow, a secret, something dark lurking beneath his perfect smile. She married him for love, but he married her for something else, and soon she would find out exactly what that was. The honeymoon felt like a dream. Soft ocean waves, candlelit dinners, stolen kisses under the moonlight, but dreams can be deceiving. At night, she would wake up to find his side of the bed empty. She told herself he was just restless, maybe overwhelmed by their new life together, but deep down a whisper of doubt crept in. Then, one night she heard it, a hushed phone call. His voice was calm, measured, too controlled. It's done, she has no idea. Her blood ran cold. Who was he talking to, and what didn't she know? She lay frozen in bed, her breath shallow, heart pounding against her ribs. She has no idea. The words echoed in her mind, twisting into something darker with every passing second. Morning came, and she played her part, smiling, laughing, pretending nothing had changed. But her mind was racing. What was he hiding? And why did it feel like she was the target? That night when he left their suite, she followed him, her bare feet silent against the cold marble floors, and then she saw him, standing in the shadows, speaking to a stranger. She trusts me completely. The plan is working. A shiver ran down her spine. Plan? What plan? And that's when the stranger chuckled. She has no idea who you really are, does she? Her stomach dropped. She had married a man she didn't even know. She gripped the wall, her fingers trembling. The air felt thin, her chest tightening with every whispered word. Who was he, and what had she walked into? She wanted to run, to storm into the room and demand answers, but something stopped her. Fear. For the first time since she met him, she wasn't sure if she was safe. She took a slow step back, heart hammering, ready to leave unnoticed. But then his voice cut through the silence. Did you hear something? Her blood turned to ice. The stranger shrugged. Probably nothing. A beat of silence, then his voice calm but laced with something chilling. I don't take risks. Find out if we have a problem. Her pulse thundered. They were looking for her. She turned and ran. She sprinted back to their suite, her pulse wild, hands shaking as she fumbled with the door. Think, breathe, act normal. The moment she slipped inside, she dove into bed, pulling the covers over herself, forcing her breath to steady. Seconds later, the door creaked open. She shut her eyes, heart pounding as she felt his presence in the room. He stood there for what felt like forever, watching. Then the mattress dipped. Warm fingers brushed against her cheek. You're shivering, he murmured. Software, sweet. A lie. She forced a sleepy mumble, pretending to stir. He exhaled, as if satisfied. But as he lay beside her, his arm draping over her waist, one thought burned through her mind. He wasn't holding her, he was trapping her. Morning light streamed through the curtains, but the cold in her chest remained. She was lying beside a man she no longer trusted. He stirred, pressing a lazy kiss to her forehead. Sleep well? She nodded, forcing a smile. Lieutenant. But she had no time to think, because then he said something that sent a chill down her spine. You went to bed early last night, but I swear I heard footsteps in the hallway. Her stomach twisted. He was watching her closely now, his gaze unreadable. Was it a casual remark or a warning? She laughed lightly. Probably just a hotel guest. A slow smile spread across his lips. Maybe. Then he leaned in, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "But if I ever catch someone sneaking around, I'll make sure they regret it." Her breath caught. That wasn't a warning. That was a promise. She felt his words linger in the air, heavy, suffocating. He knew something, or worse, he suspected her. For the rest of the day, she played her role perfectly, smiling, laughing, holding his hand like she wasn't unraveling inside. But she needed answers, and she needed them now. That night, when he stepped into the shower, she seized her chance. She grabbed his phone, her fingers trembling as she scrolled through his messages. Most were normal. Business, friends, nothing suspicious. And then, a hidden folder. She clicked it open, and what she saw made her blood turn to ice. Dozens of pictures of her. Not just recent ones, photos from years ago. Candid moments, places she didn't even remember being watched. Her entire life had been under his gaze. She barely had time to process it when the water stopped. Her heart lurched. He was coming. She fumbled to lock his phone and tossed it back onto the nightstand, just as the bathroom door creaked open. "Stay calm. Breathe. Don't let him see the fear." He stepped out, steam curling around him, a towel slung low on his waist. His eyes met hers, sharp, searching. "You look tense," he murmured. Running a hand through his damp hair, she forced a laugh. "Just tired." Another lie. He walked closer, too close. She could feel the heat of his skin, the weight of his stare, and then he reached for his phone. Her pulse pounded as he picked it up, his thumb hovering over the screen. Did she erase everything fast enough? Seconds stretched into eternity. And then he smirked. "Let's get some sleep, love. Big day tomorrow." She exhaled shakily, nodding. But as he climbed into bed beside her, his arm draping over her waist, she knew one thing for certain. He was testing her, and if she wasn't careful, she wouldn't survive his game. Sleep was impossible. She lay still, trapped beneath his arm, feeling his slow, steady breaths against her skin. But was he really asleep? Or just pretending? Every second felt like a countdown. She had to get out. Slowly she shifted, inching toward the edge of the bed. Don't wake him. Don't make a sound. She had just slipped one foot onto the cold floor when his fingers tightened around her wrist. Her breath hitched. He didn't move, didn't open his eyes, but his grip unrelenting. "Where are you going?" His voice was soft, almost lazy, but laced with something deadly. Her mind raced. "Lieutenant, think, survive." "Water," she whispered. "I just need a glass of water." Silence. Then slowly, and his grip loosened. "Hurry back," he murmured. A warning disguised as care. She nodded, stepping toward the door, but as she reached for the handle, she knew. She wasn't just running from him anymore. She was running for her life. Her fingers barely brushed the doorknob when... "Leave it!" His voice cut through the silence like a blade. She froze, her pulse roaring in her ears. "I'll get you water," he said, sitting up slowly. His eyes gleamed in the dim light, sharp, unreadable. She forced a shaky smile. "It's okay, I said I'll get it." The air felt thick, suffocating. He didn't trust her. He swung his legs off the bed, walking past her toward the minibar. She swallowed hard, watching him pour the water. Her mind screamed at her to run, but her body? Paralyzed. He handed her the glass, his fingers brushing against hers. Cold. Calculating. Watching every move she made. "Drink," he said. Her stomach twisted. Was this another test? She took a sip, forcing herself to stay calm. If he suspected anything, she was as good as dead. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Good girl. Now, let's go back to bed." She nodded. But as she lay down beside him, one thought burned in her mind. She had to escape. Tonight, her heartbeat pounded in her ears as she lay beside him, staring at the ceiling. Every second she stayed was a second closer to disaster. She waited, listened. His breathing slowed. His grip on her waist loosened. Now carefully, she slid out of bed, her feet touching the cold floor. She moved in complete silence, grabbing only what she needed, her phone, her passport, nothing that would make noise. She reached the door, almost there, just one step. Going somewhere! Her blood turned to ice. She turned slowly. He was still lying down, one arm draped lazily over his chest, his eyes barely open. But that smirk until he was wide awake. Her throat went dry. Lieutenant, think, survive. I couldn't sleep, she whispered. Thought I'd sit by the window. A slow, knowing chuckle escaped his lips. You really think I don't know when you're lying? Her stomach twisted. She had made a mistake, a deadly one. She stood frozen, her fingers still gripping the doorknob. Run, scream, do something. But her body wouldn't move. He sat up slowly, his eyes locked onto hers. Dark, amused, dangerous. Come here, he said, a simple request, but it felt like a command. Her pulse roared in her ears. If she refused, he would know. If she obeyed, she would be walking straight into his trap. So she forced a breath, let go of the door, and took slow, careful steps toward him. 1, 2, 3. He reached for her hand, his fingers tracing over her skin, his grip tightening just enough to make her heart race. I told you, love, you can't run from me. A shiver ran down her spine. He knew. He had always known. And now he was letting her know that she was his prisoner. Her throat went dry as his fingers lingered on hers, his grip tightening just enough to remind her she wasn't in control. You seem nervous, he murmured, tilting his head. Watching, studying. She forced a smile. Just tired. Another lie. Would he believe it? He exhaled slowly, then leaned in, too close. His breath brushed against her ear as he whispered, You should be. Her stomach twisted. This wasn't love. This was a game, and she was losing. Then, as if nothing had happened, he released her hand and lay back down. Come to bed, he said softly, like a husband, like a lover, like a man who hadn't just made her blood run cold. She had no choice, not yet. So she lay beside him. But as she stared into the darkness, one thought burned in her mind. She wouldn't wait for his next move. She would make hers first. She didn't sleep. She couldn't. Every breath he took beside her felt like a countdown to something terrible. Morning would come. He would watch her closer. She was running out of time. Her only option, her father. She waited until his grip on her waist loosened, then carefully reached for her phone under the pillow. One message, one chance. Her fingers trembled as she typed, Dad, I need to know the truth. Who is he? Send. Seconds later, her phone vibrated, too fast, as if he had been waiting for this moment. Her father's message made her blood turn to ice. Sweetheart, listen to me very carefully. You need to leave. Now. Her breath caught. He knew. He had always known. But before she could respond, a hand closed over her wrist. Her heart stopped. She turned slowly and met her husband's cold, knowing stare. Who are you texting at this hour? Her entire world collapsed. He saw everything. Her fingers tightened around the phone, her mind racing. Lieutenant, think, survive. Just my dad, she whispered, forcing a sleepy smile. He always checks on me. He didn't blink, didn't look away. He was studying her. Then, slowly, he held out his hand. Give me the phone. Her stomach twisted. If she refused, he would know. If she obeyed, he would see the message. She hesitated for half a second. Too long. His grip on her wrist tightened, his expression unreadable. Now! She had no choice. Not yet. She handed it over, holding her breath as he unlocked the screen. Silence, thick, unforgiving. His eyes scanned the message, then he smiled. Sweetheart, he murmured, tilting his head, you should have run when you had the chance. Her blood ran cold. It was too late.